Good, ladies and gentlemen, good evening and welcome to Citizen A, where we wrap the week's current affairs with the best political team on television from a very, very, very Auckland perspective. Warning, we're as fair and balanced as Fox News. Joining me tonight on a revolving panel of bloggers and Auckland opinion shapers. She is the most powerful female politician in New Zealand. She multitasks by being environmental, supporting Waitakere and fighting evil. Deputy Mayor of the mighty Auckland Super City and high-ranking Jedi Knight, Penny Holtz. And she has to face off against that awful Simon Bridges weekly on TVNZ's breakfast show. The next generation of Auckland Labour leadership, and as hard as the nails in Marx's coffin, ladies and gentlemen, the last great hope for Labour, Jacinda Ardern. Welcome to you both. Coming up tonight, issue 1. 210,000 New Zealand children in poverty, while the 150 wealthiest families gain $7 billion in just 1 year. As the 10th most unequal country in the OECD, is our egalitarianism now a myth? Issue 2. Another SAS soldier has died this week. What are we doing in Afghanistan? And should New Zealand on air money be spent on army recruitment TV shows for children? Issue 3 tonight. Have the financial benefits of the Rugby World Cup been oversold? And if they have, what does this mean for the economy? And we'll end the show on a final word. But let's kick things off with issue 1. New Zealand has 210,000 children in poverty, while in 1 year, the 150 richest families in New Zealand gained $7 billion. Is this a New Zealand obscenity? And are we lying to ourselves about our egalitarian principles? Jacinda, John Key's position on this is that there isn't a problem. He used flawed data to suggest inequality had lessened on his watch and pretended that the 58,000 unemployed youth don't actually exist. Do we ignore inequality at our own peril?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I think we've seen already and know already from some of the reports that have come out, for instance, on child poverty, that the fact we spend only $3 billion on child poverty, children in New Zealand, means that actually we end up paying down the track $6 billion. So if we invest early in the years that matter the most, as a nation, we are all better off as a consequence. So absolutely we ignore it at our peril.
Why are we simply saying the problem doesn't exist? Why are we doing
I'm not.
Why do our other political leaders and the government seem to say that the problem doesn't exist?
I think an acknowledgement of that is an acknowledgement of failure of leadership, particularly around, for instance, unemployment issues. We've consistently said that the solutions are there for those 58,000 young people. Firstly, invest in training, skills and education rather than cutting $140 million out of trade and skills training. Also, let's turn this economy around. It's got to be about job creation and long-term job opportunities for New Zealanders. We can do that by supporting our exporters through monetary policy, bring back the R&D tax credit, and create a fairer tax system. All of those things would make a big difference.
We spend less on early childhood development in this country than Portugal and Mexico. Isn't that a national disgrace? Well,
you know, we don't need any more evidence than we already have to prove that one of the best investments we can make is in early childhood education. And yet, what does the government do but cut it?
Penny, London has seen firsthand what inequality looks like. It's a disenfranchised, angry young person wearing Adidas. The Super City has stepped up last month where the government has failed with a school leavers job creation program. Why should the Super City be taking on these types of responsibilities?
I think, you know, it says in the book, The Spirit Level, when inequality widens, both sides do equally badly. We've just finished doing our draft spatial plan, and we make it really clear in the spatial plan there are key things that are going to transform our region, and I agree absolutely with what Jacinda's saying. Early childhood education, training for young people, plans for school leavers to enter apprenticeships and employment, and absolute clarity about where the jobs are going to come from. Unless our young people have hope for the future and jobs, that's when this disparity just increases. So, you know, we are stepping in. It's actually part of our job to do that, but it's our job to advocate for those decisions to be made for government. We've got a central government, local government forum tomorrow, and we're looking at how we actually bring that partnership together.
Paula Bennett hasn't been particularly helpful towards that energy. Why not?
Now, I am probably going to disagree with you a little bit. I need to push back. I think Paula personally probably has quite a lot of passion for this issue and has a reasonably good grasp of young people and some of the things that will make a transformative difference. I don't think she's necessarily supported by her government in the way she should be.
But you've gone ahead with this plan without her?
We are endeavouring to convince her of the need that this is
Oh,
critical.
it's just so wonderful these days.
Far more diplomatic than I
So
am.
much more diplomatic than me. Jacinda, the reality
I've got to be, I
is,
want the money.
I know, exactly, you want the money. The reality is, we don't actually care as a nation about how our fellow New Zealander is doing anymore, do we? The government have managed to exploit the resentment the working poor feel towards the non-working poor, meaning I'm all right, mate, has replaced our egalitarian cultural pretenses, hasn't it? We don't care.
I'm gonna disagree with you,
Come
but
on,
ever
we
so
don't care. We don't
politely.
care about poor
No,
people.
I don't think that's true. You know, I remember when the government made the first decision to gift 2.5 billion in tax cuts. Now that was heavily weighted towards those who were already earning the most.
That's right.
And I remember when that happened, someone in Auckland Central saying to me, "I'm a benefactor of that tax cut. I did not ask for that. I think there are a lot better ways that money could have been spent, and I would have liked to have seen a lot more go to low and middle income earners." We cannot pretend that the government is making these decisions on behalf of all Kiwis, and a lot of the Kiwis I come across on the doorsteps in Auckland Central say to me, I believe New Zealand can and should be different, and the vision that the government has they disagree with, so I don't
Wouldn't
think
you
they should be
agree,
blamed.
though, that we are now a consumer individual-based society? We don't have these connections with a wider societal ideas of a social contract or a citizen's contract with government. We're much more into it just for me and myself. It's me first and the gimme-gimmes. I mean, it's selfishness as a virtue these days. Isn't that the reason why National is so popular? They've connected to that individualism, and everyone else doesn't care about anyone else.
But again, that's not a title that I'm going to place on everyone. Sure, there will be voters who, first off, will think about the individual repercussions for them of their decision. But every day I come across other Kiwis who just say to me, "This is not the New Zealand that I want. I believe in building strong communities, and I believe I'm better off when my neighbour is better off." And it's not just about wealth. Well-being actually should be measured by a whole raft of indicators, and more economists are saying that now. Well-being is about our environment, our health system, our education. Those are all the things that we need to be investing in together.
Let me quote someone then. Penny, Gareth Morgan, in his explosive column in the Herald this week, said, I'm quoting, "One could be forgiven in the light of the jargon of government-appointed tax working groups and welfare working groups for believing that the main tax policy objective is to stop tax dodging and the main redistributive issue is to end welfare bludging. That's how dumbed down and myopic the New Zealand discussion on tax and distribution has become." What do you think is failing us in this debate? Is it the media, or is it a lack of political leadership?
You know, that's such an interesting question. I have arguments at home with my husband, who is obsessively opposed to, you know, the news and the soundbite media that we get at the moment. I think the media has dumbed down the debate into sound bites, kind of pureed sound bites. But secondly, the government, it suits them to have things in these really simple blaming terms. Let's blame the tax dodgers, let's blame the dole budgers. The real issue is, we know, Jacinda said exactly the solutions that both left and right can see right in front of them. We simply need to bite the bullet and get on to implementation. You know, enough of the studying and debating already. We simply need to do.
Both of you, question both of you. Winston Peters and several academics have suggested that the youth unemployment environment that creates these riots is ripe in New Zealand. How does stopping 16 and 17-year-olds from buying booze and ciggies when legally they can't buy them now, how does that diffuse that environment?
Yeah, and that's, I guess, the argument that we've consistently made, that there was nothing in that package from John Key that showed us how he was going to give our young people more hope that there are opportunities for them. And you actually just need to look at the numbers. In 2008, we had roughly 200 young people in what could be considered long-term unemployment on the dole. That's now 8 times higher. If these young people want jobs, they want to work, they want to upskill themselves, it's about giving them those opportunities. What I would argue is that we may not have the riots, but we've already got some manifestations of this issue already. You just need to look at our youth court. The number of kids coming through there who aren't in training, aren't in education, aren't in employment, have been disengaged from education for a long time, but are also in socially deprived families. Those are all the precursors for crime in our communities. We want to stop that, then it's got to be about the systemic issues, and it's about jobs.
How does stopping 16 and 17-year-olds from buying alcohol and cigarettes stop, re-enfranchise them into society?
I think it's a side issue, Bomber, to be absolutely blunt. I've taken over Len's role as the representative for Mayor's Task Force for Jobs for Auckland, and we're looking at breaking down the Mayor's Task Force for Jobs into small, locally based initiatives where we do exactly that. We look at joining our young people up with local businesses. Training and jobs are the solution. I think stopping the alcohol and cigarette issue simply makes us feel better about, you know, being punitive. It's like taking television away from prisoners. You know, you don't have to think too deeply about the issue and the, you know, the systemic reason for why people are in prison or, you know, 16-year-olds buying booze.
Last quote from Gareth Morgan from his column, because I just thought it was really quite groundbreaking. It requires, he's saying in terms of solutions, it requires abandoning the stereotypes that populist politics incites. It is not true that those on benefits or not in paid work are inferior and need to be whipped out of their complacency, that they would be better people if they were in paid work. With the Welfare Working Group enforcing those exact populist stereotypes that Gareth is so critical of, is Paula's Benny bashing part of the problem, or is it actually the solution?
I think probably it becomes a distraction, and that's our problem. Actually, we should be talking about the big solutions here, rather than, as Gareth is pointing out, and indulging in some of the bashing that occurs when these debates arise. For me, it's simple. Benefit numbers come down when job opportunities go up. It's as simple as that. Our starting point has to be Kiwis want to work, and the lines outside Countdown in Auckland when they opened up a new supermarket, thousands of people for a couple of hundred jobs. Now that says it all.
You get the feeling that there are some in our community, bless their hearts if you tune into ZB, who would want to see the poor in some type of stocks with vegetable and rotten fruit thrown at them.
It's the worthy poor versus you know, the deserving poor versus the undeserving poor. And again, it's a sideshow. It avoids us really getting to grips with the fact that, you know, hippie programs need to be funded, early childhood, training programs, Mayor's Task Force for Jobs, bring back, you know, decent apprenticeships, and let's engage in the real issues. You know, it is the politics by talkback, you know, politics by media soundbite, and both the left and the right, I think, are sick of it.
Who wins, who loses when the gap between the richest and the poorest in New Zealand is so vast? Who's the winners and the losers?
We all lose.
Absolutely.
It costs absolutely everyone.
Rich people are pretty happy with it.
No,
They've
again,
got to get a larger gated community. There you go. That's what they've got to pay for.
I mean, even those who might disagree with some of my views would at least agree that ultimately they want to feel safe in their homes. And so even then, when we're talking about some of these solutions, it will have that impact for them as well.
From South Africa, you understand how far these extremes can go. Where are we going wrong?
Unless we start to deal with some of the social justice issues, and unless we engage in the reality of poverty head on, and unless we look for some just and more generous solutions, we absolutely all lose. And I think even right through to the richest in Ōrākei, no one wants to see our nation failing.
Thank you, panel. Moving on to issue 2, a funeral this week in Auckland for the death of our latest SAS soldier in Afghanistan. As citizens, it's our responsibility to demand justifications for wars we wage. Wayne Mapp explains they were in Afghanistan because of the 7 New Zealanders who have been killed in a decade from terrorist acts. If our threshold for occupation is 7 dead in a decade, why aren't we sending the SAS into KFC as heart attacks kill tens of thousands of New Zealanders each year? Jacinda, what are we still doing in this war, propping up a corrupt narco state?
I don't think we should be there any longer, and Labour's been pretty clear on that, because our view has been that the war there has shifted. It's very much more a civil war than I think the initial.
We're not fighting Al Qaeda anymore, are we?
It's definitely changed.
It's the Taliban.
I mean, we went in 2001, and about 2005 we said, look, our presence should change. Let's put the provincial reconstruction team into Baniam. That's important. But the SAS presence we've wanted to have seen withdrawn since 2005, and we maintain that position.
Penny, how do we win hearts and minds when our forces are involved in handing civilians over to known torture units? What are we doing there?
I think hearts and minds are actually about allowing people to understand what is genuinely going on in Afghanistan. And I have to be really honest and say, you know, driving here, I was thinking, what do I really think about this? What do I understand? Do I understand what's on the ground? Do I understand the difference between what the SAS are doing and what the, you know, the rebuilding forces are doing? and how do we differentiate, and where is the informed discussion and debate
It's a
out there in the
decade we've been in this,
community?
a decade.
And no one really gets, you know, if you said to anyone on the street, why are we there? It's actually very hard to understand. So I don't think it's about hearts and minds. It's saying we don't want to leave a vacuum and allow, you know, a nation to kind of fall apart again. But on the other hand, should we be propping up through force? I guess time to move the seas.
Longer, we've been there longer since than any of
I
our
know,
troops
I know,
were in World
I know,
War II.
I know, I know,
It's
I know.
extraordinary.
John Key says we'll be out in March next year. I'm hearing that pre-deployment training past that is already booked for the SAS. If Key wins, this will be his first U-turn, won't it?
Well, and I mean, I think that's something that the people who are voting this election have the right to know. I think that he should give an indication of the government's plans in that
He
respect.
says it's unlikely, but I've got friends in there who are telling me that they've got pre-deployment training past that, and it's already
GST
booked
wasn't
in.
meant to go up
Well,
either.
exactly.
So
exactly.
I'm not sure about Mr. Key's word necessarily, but he should certainly. It's something that he should be held to account on. We should all have transparency.
Penny, women's rights are often used and held up as a justification for this war. Apparently the M16 can also be an instrument for gender equality. Yet 2 months ago, the only Afghan female politician was blocked from entering the United States because she didn't have a job because she'd gone into hiding for criticising the corruption of the government and US policy. We aren't shedding blood for freedom and democracy here, are we? We're shedding it for Western dominance of oil pipelines, aren't we?
And that's, you know, someone said to me lightheartedly, or are we keeping tourist routes open, or are we keeping the ability to kind of, you know, take our sheep trade through?
Yeah.
You know, there's a whole lot of reasons. We do, however, need, you know, going back to that point of leaving a vacuum and allowing injustices to continue. We do need to have a good look, though. It's not just about women's rights, it's about the ability for freedom of education and, you know, a just society to prevail. But I'm always a little bit leery, you know, using women's rights or, you know, religious freedom. I think sometimes that's a bit of a slippery slide. It's doing our things our way or no way, and yeah, I think we can.
Is it because we've given up on having an independent foreign policy? I mean, is that sound we all hear in the background, David Longy rolling in his grave?
We kind of talked about
In
that
horror,
before when
it
it came to the, you know, the Israel discussion.
Yeah.
And we do, well, that could be potentially the strength of New Zealand is, again, I get back to the well-informed, thoughtful community of New Zealand making up its mind on foreign policy from an informed basis. I think we could do better.
Question to both of you. New Zealand On Air and the New Zealand military are spending money on a new reality TV show aimed at children called Operation Hero. It screens on TV2 on Saturdays. It's a recruitment TV series out of the military's recruitment budgets. Why are we allowing the military to market directly to children in New Zealand? Walk me through the decision-making process over this.
I'm not sure I can. I had a little trouble envisaging what it was we were talking about, some kind of a Lara Croft thing.
No, they do all of these challenges for the military.
Yeah.
And you can't pretend it's not aimed at children. It's kids. It's kids doing it.
Bizarre, given the number of job losses that they've faced under the government.
I don't.
Hundreds, and yet they've got these expensive recruitment drives. It's not. A lot of this didn't make sense for me. I do have discomfort with targeting children. Absolutely. You know, if it was something that was based on orienteering or something a little bit different like that, maybe. But to be honest, I don't know really enough about it. But what I would say is, you know, I do think that our Defence Force, their goals, the things that they're most engaged with has changed a bit. And some of the roles they've played in peacekeeping missions have been incredible.
Hey, no question about that. But
at what stage do we start talking to young people about that? Careers exposed, maybe. Kids programs, not so sure.
This is distasteful as hell.
Yeah, I must admit, I am probably... the army is not sexy. The armed forces are not sexy and exciting. The armed forces are there, as you say, to do peacekeeping and in emergency, and the bringing children into, you know, some sort of quasi-militia, I just find deeply, deeply distasteful. And I, you know, I grew up in a country where everyone had to, or men, entered the army at an age of 18. I lost my closest friend in a landmine accident at 19, and I'm not really that keen on people playing soldiers.
Final question, what does winning in Afghanistan look like? What does it actually look like, us winning the West?
And that's the thing. It's not that kind of
No, it's
it's
not.
not that kind of international situation.
Because you
and
can't define what winning looks
yeah,
like, can
absolutely. And it is very much a civil war now. It is not the first, the conflict that we went into in 2001. And I think our decision making around that has to reflect that.
What does winning look like?
I just had this thought, why, if we are rebuilding, why is there not a civilian force who does rebuilding? Why isn't there, political advice, mentoring, and kind of country peer support to help that governance building? I'm not,
and that's why
you kind of think maybe that's winning. We do it with our armies.
And our provincial rebuilding team doing
that's
amazing work and
Yeah,
building
no question.
enormous goodwill with the people. But
Yeah.
the essays.
Thank you, panel. Moving on with issue 3 tonight. So we aren't getting 95,000 rugby fans coming to New Zealand after all, as that number includes tourists who would have normally visited New Zealand. That number is 70,000, so only between 15,000 and 25,000 actual rugby fans will be arriving. Have the financial benefits of the Rugby World Cup been oversold? If they have, what does this mean for the country? Jacinda, Treasury claimed 2 events would lift our growth this year. The Christchurch rebuild, and come on, it's just not going to happen for a while, and the Rugby World Cup. Neither are living up to their promised returns. Minus these growth stimulators, the budget looks terribly optimistic, doesn't it?
Yeah, I mean, we were part of obviously the team that went out and pitched to bring the Rugby World Cup to New Zealand, and I still believe it's a fantastic endeavour for New Zealand. But
we're all into that.
I totally agree that the government did claim in the budget that we would have 170,000 jobs, and when we asked where they were going to be coming from, the Rugby World Cup was high on that list.
That's right.
We've always disputed that. Look, we had some opportunities with the Rugby World Cup though. Even then we haven't made the most of all of them. For instance, the opening and closing ceremony being run by an Aussie, that was a great opportunity to give some New Zealand talent a chance to put themselves up on the world stage. So there's even been along the way a couple of missed opportunities, I think.
Penny, thank you for dealing to the issues I brought to your attention re the K Road bus stop. They've changed the design. It's come out absolutely fantastic now. The Myers Park stairwell and street art being painted over.
Mama?
This is all
Because he told us to.
Right.
Ratepayers checkbook bomber seed.
But are you feeling in any way a little conned by the numbers used to gild this Rugby World Cup lily? How much is this actually going to cost us?
In the vicinity of $100 million. I know, and I'm over. I'm going to, now I might surprise you guys, I'm actually over people whinging and moaning. It's here, we've got it. The Labour government went out and got it.
Yeah,
Good on you for
bless
doing
them.
that. We're fronting up with the money that we needed to. We've ended up with some new stations. We've ended up with some beautiful stadia, the covered stadia in Dunedin, for instance, for the nation. In Auckland, we've ended up with the city spruced up, cleaned up. We've ended up with new fields. We've ended up with a huge amount of street realignment. We've got the waterfront finished, before time, under budget. We've had a whole lot happen that when the tourists are gone, this will remain.
Yep.
I think it's here. I think it is 15 days away. I think we need to stop whinging and moaning and start smiling and actually having some fun and getting those tourists back here, because we're not a bunch of carping, moaning, negative, grey, dull hobbits.
Both of you, have we been scammed with the gold at the end of this Rugby World Cup rainbow? Clearly, Penny's going to suggest no. Have we?
Look, I think it has been oversold, but that's not to undersell, again, the benefits that it will bring us. We've always been very careful about, what numerical figure you stick on that, because again, when you're putting yourself up on the international stage, it's hard to know what benefits you reap down the track. So I guess our criticism of the government has been, don't sell us to New Zealand as the answer to our unemployment problems.
Bingo.
Because actually, that's not going to let you off the hook. We need to keep focusing on that issue for what it is. That doesn't take away from the fact that the Rugby World Cup presents an awesome opportunity for all of us. So that's how I would split the issue up.
I promised myself I'm going to be positive about this Rugby World Cup. I have! No, I didn't! I began the year going, this is the first time I'm ever going to care about a sporting event, and I'm going to get into it because I live downtown and I want to be involved, but Oh, there's just some of it doesn't seem like the 170,000 jobs. I just don't think.
I know. And some of that is right. We were, I guess, an enthusiastic supporter of Rugby World Cup. Some of it's not going to work. There are going to be some surprising impacts, and I think we just need to wait for some of the good stuff to come, but be a bit grown up and mature about it.
Amen.
You know, and let's make the most of it.
Let's wrap the show with final word. Jacinda, your final word this week is?
I think we're at an absolute crossroad in New Zealand at the moment, and come November we're going to have some really stark choices, and they're all about our future and whether we own it. We have 58,000 young people who are not in employment, education or training. We have $16 billion worth of debt, and the government's current answer is to sell off our assets. I think that New Zealand deserves much more hope than that. Instead, we could be entirely re-gearing our economy, supporting our exporters, bringing in a fairer tax regime and a capital gains tax, and investing in research and development, clean tech, green jobs and a sustainable future. That for me represents hope. That for me represents the alternative that is the Labour Party. To make sure you don't get in trouble, this message is authorised by me.
I never have to put that accreditation when the National Party person's on. Penny, your last word this week is?
How do I top that? God, that's fantastic. Just to say, probably this is the most boring thing I could say, but please have a look out for the Auckland Spatial Plan, otherwise known as Auckland Unleashed, which we finally signed off after about 127 meetings yesterday. Take time to have a look, check it out, and it does pick up the issues that we've been talking about today. It would be great for people to get involved and advocate on some of those social issues that Auckland needs to pick up. It's not just about green space, parks, roads and trains. I think we just need to look after the bits in between, which is our community.
Thank you, Jacinda. Thank you, Penny. Ladies and gentlemen, to my final word, whānau, I want to pay homage to whatever idiots have agreed to the axing of bus routes throughout central Grey Lynn and central Auckland. I choose not to drive and choose not to own a car so that my environment is not damaged or polluted any more than it has to be. And my supposed reward for that civic contract is supposed to be a transport system that can transport me. That civic contract has become a joke under the new public transport cutbacks, with one new route in particular that demands as much contempt as can be vomited upon it. The horrific new inner city red bus link has replaced all other buses travelling up Queen Street to K Road and begins in the tourist centre of the waterfront, meaning that by the time it arrives on Queen Street, it is already packed with tourists, leaving no room for locals. These new cutbacks mean buses are so packed and inconveniently infrequent that New Zealand Bus has finally managed to achieve that golden moment in Auckland public transport madness. Services so bad that people choose not to use them. Bravo, New Zealand Bus. Bravo. Most governments use an event like the Rugby World Cup to upgrade their public transport, not degrade it. I foresee Auckland transport is shit becoming the highest trending tweet on Twitter as overseas visitors are welcome to the hate crime that is public transport in New Zealand. If you like tonight's show, please join our Citizen A Facebook site and connect with other like-minded citizens, and follow me on my Citizen Bomber Twitter and Facebook page. Thanks for watching, whānau. Good night, Aotearoa.
Supporting local content so you can see more of New Zealand on air.